what's going on YouTube? You guys have tuned into COVID all the time, where we talk about coronavirus all the friggin' time. And I recently discovered a new sub that's kind of a great source of content for those people who want to question coronavirus. Not to say it isn't real, not to say it's not happening, not to say it doesn't exist, but I think there's different ways of looking at it. A lot of people seem to be okay with government overreach and locking down and giving the government whatever power they need. Reminds me of the famous, what is it, the Ben Franklin quote, I think it was, like, those who choose security over freedom deserve neither, or something along those lines. A lot of people are just willing, they don't care that the government's overreaching. They don't want to question anything. They just want to be safe and whatever it takes to be safe. And this is a sub that looks at, like, look, is locking down really the smart thing to do? Like, are we really following the science, or are we following a certain narrative? And so I recently discovered this sub r/lockdown skepticism, and we'll start covering more articles and more content from this sub. This one, I just thought it would be interesting to get some different Redditors' perspectives. It says, do you really think this will continue into next year? And what's going to be really interesting about this is if we were to look at like r/coronavirus or r/coronavirus US, I think we might get a very different response than we are from this sub. But this Redditor, Blushed Alex, goes on to ask, do you really think this will continue on into next year? And he says, just wanted to get the general feeling from people on this. Obviously, this will be dependent on your location, but I recently have started feeling like the lockdown people won't continue to comply with all this into next year. I'm kind of surprised that people have complied with it as far as they have and as long as they have. Despite the doomers and the new normal advocates, I've seen what he's referring to. There's a lot of people out there who are like, we're never ever going to shake hands again. We're never ever going to hug people again. Society forever has changed, as opposed to like, look, once we get the numbers down, once we get a vaccine or whatever else, let's go back to normal. Or maybe even, I think it's about time to go back to normal right now, regardless of the virus being amongst us. Let's take some common sense precautions, but let's not go crazy. Let's get back to living our lives. This thing isn't, the plague that we thought it was going to be at the early onset. He goes on to say, I've seen a lot more public pushback against measures taken here in the UK, particularly over the last month or so. And UK has been having a lot of protests and things like that. And it only seems to get stronger each time the government clamps down harder. The discussion of whether the lockdown is worth it has become a lot more commonplace amongst people, it seems. So I sort of feel like the normal flu season and the holidays come and go, and there's no catastrophic second wave. The new year will be a turning point for a lot of people. Coming up to March, the realization that it has been a full year of this shit show will hit, and most won't want to continue on. What are your thoughts on this? I'm trying to be optimistic here, but is it just naivety, or are we really fucked for the foreseeable? So, we're definitely not in the same place that we were last March, last April, right? Like, people were freaked out. Early on, even I myself was like, I wasn't freaking out, but I was a little bit worried. I was, washing, sanitizing my hands when I left the grocery store. In the back of my head every now and again, I'd be like, oh, is this really as bad as they're making it out to be? But, I think within a couple of weeks, people kind of took sides, and you were either hiding under your bed, or you were like, look, I don't want to get this. I'm willing to take some normal precautions, but, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it type thing. I definitely think people, to some extent, have come around, but it's amazing how quickly we adapt and how quickly things become, quote unquote normal. I hate to say the new normal, but like the idea that we would be walking around with masks on was insane to me a year ago. And now I kind of catch myself like it's almost weird to see somebody without a mask. And even though I'm completely against masks and hate all of this, I'll see somebody in a store without a mask, and I'll be like, who does this fucking asshole think he is not wearing a mask? And it's not even that I really care about coronavirus. It's kind of almost more that, like, this crabs in a bucket mentality that, like, hey, if I have to wear this bullshit, so does this guy. One thing I definitely do notice personally is, it seems like everybody kind of tiptoes around the issue. Like, nobody wants to be the inconsiderate asshole who wants to kill grandmas. So when a topic comes up, it's like, yeah, we're staying safe, and then, like, as soon as the other person's like, look, man, I think this is all bullshit, and this is like the biggest overreaction in human history, then it's like you feel like you can open up. And I'm definitely outspoken about how I feel about this, and I notice I'll whether it's friends, family, coworkers, friends of friends, people will kind of be tiptoeing around the issue. And as soon as I'm kind of like, look, this is kind of bullshit. Like, I'm going to the gym all the time. You and me are hanging out right now. I just got back from a trip to Montana. Like, I'm really not that concerned about it. Then people kind of feel like it's safe to kind of open up and be like, yeah, how about this shit, man? But it seems like everybody kind of wants to, like, keep their mouth shut and kind of not make any waves. And I think it's going to take, if you are somebody who's kind of against lockdowns or doesn't think that that's necessarily the best reaction to this, I think it is going to take some civil disobedience, and you are going to, and if you are outspoken about this and aren't afraid to share your views, I think you're going to find that other like-minded people, I think you're going to find that there's more like-minded people like you that, see this for what it is, and they're going to be willing to open up to you once they realize that you're not going to, jump down their throat and call them a grandma killer. Let's see. Claude Pussy says the head of the Swedish Public Health Agency has said that they're going to continue with their current restrictions for at least a year. Granted, their restrictions are completely light, but they do include working from home if possible. This rocked me back on my heels. Every day I'm beset with this horrible feeling of the world having gone stark, raving mad, and being part of a very small group of powerless dissenters. I'm certain if we stop all the restrictions and testing and went back to normal life, we wouldn't notice anything. And I think that's a couple good points here. I think if you tuned out to the media, I don't think you would even know that coronavirus was going on. I saw a great video by, I can't remember his name. There's this country music artist, young guy, lives in Tennessee. I think he actually just recently moved. But he made a video and he kind of said, like, look, I don't know anybody who has coronavirus. I don't know anybody who knows anybody who has coronavirus. I don't know anybody who knows anybody who knows anybody who's got coronavirus. He's like, if I didn't watch the news and I didn't know this was going on, I would have no idea that this was going on. There aren't dead bodies piling up in the streets. I don't know people affected by this. He said, but I'll tell you what I do see. He said, I haven't seen this with my own eyes, but I'll tell you what I have seen. I have seen a lot of government overreach. I have seen a lot of people freaking out. I have seen a huge overreaction, and that's basically how I feel about it as well. So kind of what I said earlier, don't be afraid to be a little bit more outspoken, to kind of share your beliefs. And I think you're going to realize that, there's kind of a small vocal minority kind of pushing this, making you feel bad about, having your own view or wanting to assess risk for yourself. Let's see. RLGH says, I'm certain if we stopped all the restrictions and testing, went back to a normal life, we wouldn't notice anything. This is what I've been thinking for ages. We're just keeping this charade going, this endless cycle of testing, closing things, restrictions. Hospitals aren't getting overwhelmed, and we're getting a really low number of deaths per day. Why can't we just ignore it, declare it over, basically just fuck it off, and have society as it should be? And, that's kind of an interesting point. An interesting point as well, which is this whole thing just kind of a charade? It started out that we don't want to overwhelm hospitals. We're not trying to get to 0 cases. We're not trying to put an end to the virus. We just don't want to overwhelm hospitals. Well, we accomplished that goal, and now kind of the goalpost, the narrative has changed to like certain. I think Mayor Lori Lightfoot in Chicago said, until we see 0 new cases, we're not going to open things back up. And so it seems like kind of the goalposts have been moved. Let's see. Even if the restrictions here are relatively light, I still feel pretty upset when he said that, particularly with social distancing, since it's not just a small sacrifice and actually takes away our humanity from us, and also because the public agency say themselves that symptomatic carriers are the ones driving the spread. Let's see. Let's try to get away from like just Sweden. Lord Newsom and his blind worshippers will absolutely require this. Whatever the definition, endgame change every week. Continue in California into next year, probably mid next year if we're lucky. Okay, so Brooklyn Ferry says, this simply isn't sustainable, so I think this will carry on into next year, but not last for the whole of 2021. Here's the thing, we're going on, let's see, technically it started in February. I think lockdowns and stuff didn't start until March, but we got March, April, May, June, July, August, September, and we're kind of just in the beginning of October. So we've been going on 7 months. If people are willing to put up with this for 7 months, are they willing to put up with it for 14 months, 16 months, 2 years? I think the longer it goes on, the scarier it becomes, because the longer it goes on, the more of quote unquote, I hate to use this word, but the more of the new normal it goes on. A month into this, 3 months into this, this is fucking crazy. We've never lived like this before. Let's put an end to this. But the longer it goes on, the more normal it becomes. And I think kind of the harder it is to reverse it. I kind of get the idea that we're going to miss one Christmas. We're going to miss two Christmases. We're going to miss three. This has been going on for 3 years. I kind of get that mentality or that attitude. But at the same time, I also kind of see it being the longer this drags on, the more normal this becomes, and you kind of forget what life was like, quote unquote, before the virus. Let's see, people will start to question the restrictions as body counts continue to not pile up in the streets. We've already seen bodies not continue to pile up in the streets, and we still have all these restrictions. We've already seen, government officials placing rules on us and then ignoring these rules themselves, whether it be Lori Lightfoot telling us not to get haircuts and then going to get a haircut, whether it be Pritzker, Illinois Governor Pritzker, telling us not to travel and then him himself traveling to Florida and Wisconsin, whether it be de Blasio telling us not to go to the gym and then he goes to the gym. We've seen how a lot of this is about tax revenue and business and not actually about science or safety. If people were going to push back, I kind of feel like they already would have pushed back. We've already seen Disney put 28,000 people on California's unemployment rolls, and that was just the first shot fired. We're deep in the sunk cost fallacy at the moment, but faced with the collapsed tax revenues, mounting debt, mass unemployment, permanent closures of businesses and organizations that once employed millions of people, and increasingly hard to ignore second order effects, backlogs in hospitals, skyrocketing mental health and substance abuse issues, myriad of problems with education, rent, mortgage crisis, and not enough food banks to keep up with demand. There's going to have to be a massive backpedal if we don't want to end up living in a Mad Max movie. I think politicians are stupid, but I don't think politicians are stupid enough to let it get to that point, especially if the likes of Florida are able to get to quote-unquote normal first and model a way forward. And I do think a lot of these states are kind of going to save us. The media really wanted to push or spin a narrative that Florida and Texas were going to hell in a handbasket when they opened up. But we also see other, states with pretty strict lockdowns also experiencing spikes and things like that. So I think at some point, when certain governors have kind of the backbone and the balls to stand up to the media narrative and really just kind of this whole COVID's going to kill us all narrative, and we realize that everybody there doesn't die, I think this thing may start to kind of fall apart. Major business organizations are already planning for normalcy starting in 2021. It's kind of sad to me that this is going to drag out that far even, whether it's a planned Justin Bieber concert tour or New York City's Metropolitan Opera canceling its 2021 season but planning to stage next fall, 2021, or Facebook leasing large amounts of new office space, or restaurant groups actually expanding to new locations in areas served by business commuters. Hold on, I'm going to plug in to get some battery. Let's see, where were we? To kick that can down the road again would be devastating and indeed the end of the road for many of the groups and people making those plans, and for the people advising them on their plans. There's a lot of money at stake, and money eventually talks. I remember 1919 was a pretty normal year. I think he means 2019. Even Fauci has gone on record as saying we'll be more or less normal by late next year. And while we all know that his opinions change like the weather, I don't think he's deluded enough to believe that this can go on for years and years. He goes on to edit the OP, or the poster, I should say. I should mention here regarding my example above of the Metropolitan Opera canceling an entire season but promising to have one next year, that a friend of mine has a spouse involved in a tangential capacity with the Met Opera. And the initial humor was that the season canceling announcement was actually going to be a Met Opera is shutting down announcement. That seems impossible if cities like NYC start to lose their anchor cultural organizations, and they are truly fucked. And if that rumor kicks up again next year amid a lower case count and in the absence of people dropping dead in the streets, and past the point at which anyone expected us to still be shut down with no solutions, past the limit of general, we'll get a vax and then have arts again patients, a lot of people are going to put a lot of pressure. Let's see. My dream is for the pandemic to be over and the governors and leaders who infringed upon our civil rights will be taken to court. I would love that too, but we all know there's not going to be any consequences. In fact, I think the one thing pushing people like King Cuomo to keep these restrictions is because he's scared to shit about being taken to court for the deaths he caused for his nursing home mandate and all the abuses of powers. We can only hope AG Barr will prosecute these evildoers. Let's see. No, it literally can't, at least not in the U.S. The real pain of economic fallout from this is just starting. It's been bad. It's about to get worse. Unemployment is running out. Businesses are closing. Mass layoffs are starting. Eviction moratoriums are ending, and millions of people are about to get desperate. Newly homeless, unemployed aren't going to give a fuck about COVID cases. So, here's kind of an interesting point. So, even though all this started back in March, for months and months and months, a lot of people kind of looked at this as a vacation. I'm getting to take up. There's all types of articles about it. I'm getting to take up hobbies that I'd long forgotten about. I'm spending more time with my kids. I'm not going out spending money. We're playing board games and doing fun things at home. You got to remember, a lot of people were making significantly more staying home with the CARES Act, as well as their state unemployment, than they were working. And that ran out, sometime in August, I think, but they're still getting, 300 from the federal government, 100 from the state, so another, 400 extra bucks on top of normal unemployment. I believe eviction moratoriums federally, I think, have been kept in place till the end of the year. A lot of cities still have them as well. So, even though times are tough and a lot of people are hurting, I do kind of agree that we haven't felt the full weight of this. I think it was just Regal Cinemas just announced that they're shutting down all theaters. I think a lot of those shutdowns are going to be temporarily, but the dominoes are just starting to fall from things that were kind of put in place back March. Let's see. Okay, here's an interesting point. Nasty says, "Man, I think it's going to be decided at the ballot box. If we keep voting in Democrats, they are going to get the idea that everyone totally loves lockdowns." This has become a very kind of partisan issue. Republicans or conservatives or libertarians tend to be against lockdowns. Democrats seem to be all for them. Not saying that's right or wrong, but I think that's kind of the reality. I've been thinking this. Do you think whether Trump recovers or not will turn out to be a big factor in how quickly things start to die down? I am by no means a Trump supporter, but I shudder at the prospect of him passing from this because I know it will just be used by the doomers to stroke the fire even longer. So that's kind of interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. I know a lot of people hate Trump, and I kind of wish we had anybody in the White House besides Trump. But this almost kind of becomes not voting for the president so much as voting for a direction. Do we want to keep lockdowns going, or do we want to end lockdowns? And if you want to keep lockdowns going, you vote Biden, the guy who's, as Trump jokes, is always wearing a mask and wears the biggest mask he can find. Or do you vote Trump, who, is kind of for getting things back to normal? I'm going to wrap up this video because we're closing in on 20 minutes here. Let me know your thoughts. Will this continue into next year? Drop a comment down below. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button below. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.